What's up everyone, Swillo here, and today I'm going to be doing a Mewtwo guide in Pokken Tournament. This guide's going to go over his moveset, some general strategies, and some combo discussion. It's mostly going to be aimed towards beginner and mid-level players, but also high-level players will be able to see my perspective on this character. So let's get started. First in the moveset we have Neutral Y. Neutral Y is a pretty slow and simple projectile that doesn't really track. It's very easy to dodge. But the main perk of this move is that you can cancel it quickly into any of your A moves. So you can do neutral A, you can do forward A Hyper Beam, you can do something like barrier into Drain Punch, or you can just do anything out of barrier, teleport, whatever. So the move itself, you're rarely going to hit with this move, but what it does is it puts something on the field which could set up the potential to hit with a different move, or just to keep your opponent moving in general. So it's kind of a pressure tool, but of course you don't want to be predictable with it. Next we have Side Y. Side Y is one of Mewtwo's best moves in field phase for both just mounting an offense and for evading attacks. Because of the side movement, you can evade a lot of linear attacks. Like let's say if Mewtwo was to use Hyper Beam, for instance, I could dodge that into a punish with Side Y. On top of that, just like Neutral Y, you can cancel into A moves. So you can do barrier, you can do Hyper Beam, you have Neutral A, and so on. So you have those different options to potentially react to what your opponent's doing. Side Y, if used predictably, can be beaten with an air approach, so try not to be predictable with it, but at the same time, if your opponent isn't quick on their reaction, you can go into barrier to intercept their aerial option. So it's kind of while you want to use the move a lot, you also have to be aware that your opponent can approach from the air safely against it, and you have to be ready to either bait it or whatever they decide to do. Next we have Forward Y. Forward Y has counter properties. Now this move is really unsafe to use in neutral, so you mainly just want to use it on reaction to choice moves. Overall, it's one of the moves I use the least with Mewtwo. I really don't use it a lot at all, but there are a couple of really handy moves to use it against. Also, against homing strings, it's actually really good if your opponent does a homing string and they do the third hit. If you see them charging the third hit, it's a really solid option to do, because if they release early, it'll beat it, and if they fully charge it, you'll hit them before it comes out. So that's probably one of the best applications of the move in my opinion, is against third hit homing attacks. If you see your opponent charging, react to it and throw it out, and you're going to beat any release they do. Okay, so next up we have Back Y, Fire Spin. Fire Spin's a really interesting move. You mostly only see it used as an Oki tool when someone gets a knockdown from switching from dual phase to field phase. Mostly because it has a really slow startup, so it's easy to dodge. But sometimes if your opponent's playing very stationary, you can throw it out. Like let's say if you're playing a Suicune and they try to throw up Ice Wall, normally they're just going to stand still behind it, and that's a situation where you could just throw it out and stop their movement so that you can get around the wall. Just like his other Y options, you can cancel this into stuff like Hyper Beam, Neutral A, barrier. So you can cancel into any of your A options. When used as an Oki tool, let me kind of switch the phase real quick and show an example of that. Whoops. Okay. Sorry guys. I forgot how to play my character. Okay, so here we go. Okay, so when used as an Oki tool, The main thing you're going to want to do with this is... Hold on. Let me set him to block. Sorry guys. Alright, so here we go. He's going to block the fire spin now. Okay, so when your opponent wakes up and blocks the fire spin, some of the options you have is to either just wait for it to wear off and then go for your mix-up, or you can do something like charge counter, make them block the fully charged counter attack. What blocking the fully charged counter attack does is give you frame advantage, and then you can go for your mix-up. It also just wastes time. That's probably one of the better reasons to use it, is let's say if your opponent's in synergy burst mode, or if you need to wait for a support to fill up, or if you have health advantage and you're trying to run the timer down. That's one of the main reasons to really use this, just because the mix-up options you get out of it are not outstanding. It's kind of like a it's kind of like a superficial aesthetic kind of mix-up. It just looks cool to fire spin them before you finally actually do whatever your mix-up you're gonna do. So the main reason you really want to use this and consider using it is for time purposes. The amount of time that it consumes, whether to build up support, whether to run down synergy, whether to run down the clock. Those are the main reasons you're going to use fire spin, is to get time in your favor in some way. If your opponent does counter in the middle of fire spin, you can punish it with any pierce option. So let me get him to counterattack. Oops. Counterattack reaction. Okay. So if they wake up into the fire spin with a counter option, you can use anything that pierces, like a fully charged counter. You could do like hyper beam, or you could even just grab them. So anything that's going to be a counter, because the whole time the fire spin is active, they're stuck in their counter animation. Okay, so let's go back to field phase. Next up we have homing attack. Mewtwo's homing attack is one of the best in the game. It's really fast. It's not as fast as it looks, it just has a lot of priority. So even when you go against characters like, let's say, Weavile, who has a really, really fast homing attack, he'll still beat out Weavile's homing attack head to head, just because it has so much range and priority that it becomes active before characters with faster homing attacks. Not every character. There are some characters that he does lose to. Also, his homing attack is an anti-air. If your opponent goes into the air, there's very, very, very few instances where you're going to lose. If they do an action at the peak of their jump, it can whiff. Or there are a handful of moves that just might out-prioritize it when they become active. But generally, if your opponent jumps, you should be going for the anti-air with the homing attack. It's very strong. You can also do some standard mix-ups like homing grab. And if your opponent blocks homing, generally you want to stop at the second hit. And one of the best things about his homing when blocked is that it pushes the opponent away. Let me just showcase this. After he blocks, oh crap. Here we go. Sorry guys, I'm bad at this. Alright, so after he blocks, you see the distance it creates between me and him? This is a pretty safe distance. It's a distance that's very in favor of Mewtwo. It's not like he can just grab back or quickly homing attack back or anything. This distance is really strong for Mewtwo, whether it means setting up another homing attack, whether it means going into a barrier option and such. So always consider that. Not only should you just stop after the second hit for safety reasons, but also the spacing it creates is really powerful and in your favor. Alright, next, let's go to A moves. We've already kind of showed off some of the A moves through chains. We have neutral A. Neutral A is a really, really strong projectile. it beats out or trades with a lot of projectiles. It can be jumped over, but the follow-up has anti-air properties, so if your opponent doesn't properly time their punish right, you will knock them out of the sky even if they jump over it. It has good tracking, and during the dash part, you can press R to cancel in any direction, any sidestep. So if you want to do something basic like that, like a basic grab mix-up, or you want to go into homing, or you want to just do whatever, you have all those options, or you just want to pull back. So it's a really strong move in neutral. In some matchups, it's really overwhelming to use against certain characters more so than others. Next we have Hyper Beam. Hyper Beam is a really good move because it becomes, once it's active, it covers a large amount of space instantly. So if you see your opponent, like let's say Gardevoir for instance, doing a lot of really slow projectiles, trying to clear up the field, you can just throw out a Hyper Beam and easily punish them with that safely from a distance because of how quickly Hyper Beam goes full screen. So it's a really strong option for punishing characters that are pressing buttons at long distances, and it also pierces counters. You can also teleport out of it if you see that your opponent's not really doing something, but you just wanted to be prepping it up. Sometimes you want to prep a Hyper Beam just to be like, maybe he might press a button here, but then you see that he's not pressing a button, or he goes into shield. Hyper Beam is unsafe on block, but it's very difficult to punish. Even still, you may just want to back out sometimes, just because it's not worth giving your opponent the opportunity to close the gap, depending on the matchup. Next up we have Barrier. Barrier's a really powerful option for Mewtwo. You can do something like Drain Punch, which covers a large amount of space. So if you block like certain projectiles from mid-screen, you can easily punish with a Drain Punch. Let's see if I can get my opponent to do something. If you can do like Confusion at close range to punish close range options, and then you get full combos, whether it's something like homing attack, or it's something like Hyper Beam. So you kind of get whatever. You also have Telekinesis, which is probably the option you're going to use the least, but it's still a mix-up. If your opponent starts to respect your other options in Barrier, then you can mix them up with Telekinesis if you're close enough. Alright, so next, let's go into our jump options. Jump Y. This move is decent and bad at the same time. It's very linear, very easy to dodge. It's not like huge damage. It covers a lot of space. Probably one of the best uses of it is like if you think your opponent's just about to jump. It's a pretty solid distance anti-air. Just kind of knocks them out of ground because it hits very high. So it's a solid anti-air on the ground. You're probably not going to get much mileage out of it. And in some cases it's a decent poke. But depending on the matchup and the character's options, they could punish you, or you could be giving them an opportunity to close the gap. So use it, but be mindful of when you use it. Overall, it's a move that I just don't use sometimes, unless my opponent's really giving me a lot of openings to use it. Alright, so next up we have Jump X, his dive kick. It's a punish tool. If you see your opponent do something that you can punish, go for it, but Mewtwo's dive kick is pretty slow on startup, making it very susceptible to counterattacks. So, like I said, it's very much a punish tool. You want to use it as a punish tool, or if you're just looking for a mix-up. Overall, it's not a very good dive kick. It doesn't track or home before going off. Very short range, as you can see, so it's just a punish option when you see your opponent do something they shouldn't have done. Jump A. This move you can do instantly, or you can charge it. This move is okay in some situations, but if your opponent's very alert and they move out of the way, you're very open. If the move whiffs, you can get punished extremely hard, but in some situations your opponent will just be too afraid to move, so you can get some free chip and pressure, and you can also beat out counters and certain other moves with long duration with it. So it's a good tool to mix into your gameplay at times, but don't use it a lot, because usually once your opponent sees the move, they'll be more aware when it comes the next time, so that they can get out of the way and punish you. Also in the air, Mewtwo's unique action when you press R is his air dash. If you just air dash normally, you get the full air dash with the slow fall. This is very, very unsafe in field phase because of all the landing lag. You're pretty much giving your opponent all the time in the world to punish you. Of course, you can still cancel into an attack, but generally when you air dash, you're putting yourself at a pretty big disadvantage. Now, if you hold back, you can descend to the ground quicker and cut the air dash shorter, and you can still cancel it during the descent. This is more times than not a better option. You can also hold back further into the air dash animation. Sorry guys. Generally though, you don't want to air dash in field phase unless you're just trying to do like some really elaborate mix-up. It's just not a good option, because being in the air in field phase in general is really unsafe because there's a lot of landing lag, and you're just giving certain characters the opportunity to really capitalize. Oh, that's pretty much it for field phase. Let me talk about some combos. I kind of went over some, but you have side Y into Hyper Beam, side Y into Drain Punch. You have the auto combo, side Y into neutral A. You have Fire Spin into pretty much whatever you want to do. Telekinesis into homing attack. And wait, what did I want to? Oh yeah, get into attack, reaction settings, normal attack. Okay. And then you can do homing attack if you don't want to use up your synergy. You can do Hyper Beam if you want to get max damage, but you're going to use up some of your synergy doing that. And if you like field phase, you can go for an Oki setup like Telekinesis, homing attack 2. Whoops, I didn't mean to do that third homing attack, even though it whiffed. So let me try that again. Do Telekinesis into 2 homings, and then go for like Fire Spin setup to get some Oki if you want to keep your opponent into field phase for one more mix-up. And that's pretty much it as far as field phase goes. Next up, we're going to have dual phase. I'm going to cut this video into parts, so this will be the field phase part, and check out the next video for dual phase.